Website Asia Media has been emphasizing with its student staff written articles and text about topics of Asia that are media driven one way or another. I like to look at Asia in terms of the winter and then the spring, summer, and fall to show an evolution of sort of the mood and so forth. I don't organize the book that way, but I wanted to organize the discussion that way because I think it's easy to discuss it in these four different sort of moods. Middle of the 90s, at the Los Angeles Times, I started a column. And the column was devoted entirely to Asia, on the theory that this was the coming thing, the most dramatically rising sector of the globe. If you looked at the numbers, the population numbers and the economic numbers and the rise of China and the rise of the four tigers of Asia, it was clear that the 21st century was going to be the Asian century, just as the 20th had by everyone's agreement been the American century, and the 19th by everyone's agreement had been the European century. So therefore, I wanted to do a column that was pitched to the future. And my colleagues, very talented colleagues in American journals on the East Coast were writing about the Middle East and Europe and so on, and that was fine. But here in Los Angeles, at the LA Times, at least for the 5 years that they ran the column, I said, we'll do something different and we'll look at Asia because that's the coming thing. We have to realize that we really are sharing a future with Asia, and once we understand it's a shared future, I think we'll get better at it. Part of it is that a lot of the American officials were really East Coast types. The one bright spot really in the 90s was in fact Warren Christopher, the Secretary of State, because he had come from Los Angeles. His law firm was the first law firm to set up an office in Beijing quite a number of decades ago. And Christopher really understood that to some extent Washington was facing the wrong ocean, which was the Atlantic, and that American policy had to face the Pacific Ocean. But then the Middle East would blow up, or you had the Kosovo problems in Yugoslavia and so forth. So it's a question of being distracted, and even today with the famous pivot to Asia, you see we're right now bogged down on what to do about Syria and Iran. The relationship with China and the U.S. Was frozen in the immediate aftermath of the Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989. Then President Bush Sr. could not go to Beijing because of the pall, the negative cloud that Tiananmen cast over world opinion. But when the Clintons got in office, they took a more pragmatic view, and they were eager to warm up relations with China, in part, actually, although it was a Democratic administration, and although on the Democratic left, the human rights people and the labor unions were not keen, the business community in the United States was very keen to warm up relations with China, and the Clinton administration saw that. They also saw it in terms of better trade relationships with China and opening China up to the world. But they had to get over the Tiananmen problem. They had to get over a number of issues, and then finally, towards the end of the 90s, Clinton went to China on a famous visit of about 9 days. And I have to say, with my usual lack of modesty, that my column was the first column in the United States to call for the president to go to China. Fundamentally, the Islamic world was completely misunderstood by the West. And to further the misunderstanding, a very famous book surfaced called The Clash of Civilizations by the late Samuel Huntington at Harvard. And the thesis of the book is that tension between religious blocs, Hindu, Islamic, Christian, so forth, was inevitable because of the nature of those cultures, and it was a very bleak book. It was, some thought it was racist. I just thought it was oversimplified. But in any event, a lot of problems were building up and brewing at that time, and they were not attended to. And then, of course, there was the big blow-up and disaster of 9/11. The decision of the Chinese leaders, and particularly Zhu Rongji, the premier, who I think is the successor, really, intellectually, to Deng Xiaoping as an economic reformer, to say that China has got to move forward and be a globalized economy. Because that not only affects China, but affects its neighbors. Do you know China abuts 14 other countries? It has South Korea now does more trade with China than with the United States. That decision, I think, was monumental and was symbolic of the move into the 21st century, which I call the Asian century. I think that without it, you wouldn't have had that incredible feeling of like this out of Asia. And it did provide some leadership, particularly psychological leadership, particularly with Japan having kind of leveled off. Well, to me, it's a leading economic indicator that, for instance, in Korea, which now has maybe something like the 12th largest economy in the world, just South Korea, has produced a culture. I mean, 15 years ago, you couldn't buy a halfway decent tie in Seoul. I mean, it was no design. Now, K-pop is, you know, the housewives of Japan are going gaga over the soap stars out of South Korea. The rise of culture all through Asia has been very, very healthy, because really what it has done is has been a counterweight to Westernization and Western culture, which I don't think there's anything inherently wrong or evil about it. But now they have their own cultures and they're competing, and we're picking up stuff from them. So to me, it's all part of a globalization. With the rise of the economies, you have time now to create an entertainment industry, to create a design business, create a pop culture. I do think that because the cultures of Asia are very different, while we all have everything, we all as human beings have a lot in common. Nonetheless, I think bringing some of these Asian values back to the table, the importance of the family, the importance of respect for elders, and also balancing individual rights with group rights and community rights and so forth. I think these are all valid issues, and I think Asia will bring those issues to us. I also think China will bring those issues to us. Now, on the downside is everything that I've said positive could go bad. China could revert to a Maoist kind of self-inflicted suicide. Japan could stumble very badly. India could remain a mess. And Indonesia could not move forward along the political path that it's on. I'm an optimist about Asia. I think it's going to be a great century overall. I think there'll be fewer wars. And I think what Asia will bring to the table will be sort of complete the growth of the global economy. And then we can look forward to the 22nd century being the Latin American or African century.